You light a cigarette outside your office. Modern habit, right? Something people picked up a few centuries ago when tobacco showed up in Europe. Nope. This one's way older. Like embarrassingly older. Older than farming. Older than bread. Probably older than pants. Older than the wheel, actually. Which feels like it should be a bigger deal than it is. Here's the reframe. Humans weren't smoking to relax after a rough day at work. There was no work. There was barely a day the way we think of one. And they were already doing this over 12,000 years ago. In a desert in Utah, archaeologists dug up an old campfire. Not your grandpa's old campfire old like 12,300 years old. And sitting right there in the ashes, burnt seeds from wild tobacco plants. Nobody planted these on purpose. These people just found a weird, bitter plant growing in the dirt and thought, sure, let's set this on fire and see what happens. Which, honestly, sums up a lot of early human history. Archaeologist Daron Duke and his team found this hut, and the timeline is what makes it so strange. No Stonehenge yet, no writing yet. Humans hadn't even invented the wheel. But somehow, they'd already found the one plant on the entire planet that messes with the brain in this exact specific way. Priorities. There were no cigarettes back then, obviously, and no pipes either. At least, not yet. So how do you even use a plant like this with nothing but your hands and a fire? Probably wrapped in a leaf and chewed, or tucked against the gum the way some people still use tobacco today, or burnt loose and the smoke just breathed in. Simple, low-tech, and apparently effective enough that people kept doing it for the next 12,000 years. So why would anyone reach for a random, bitter, faintly poisonous plant before they understood anything about it? Somebody, at some point, had to be the very first person to try it, with zero guarantee it wasn't going to just kill them. That's either incredible bravery or incredible boredom, and honestly, probably some of both. Probably not for fun though. More likely, it helped with focus on a long hunt or dealing with hunger and exhaustion. Or it was part of something ceremonial, marking a moment that mattered. Less coffee break, more tool. Eventually, in the Andes, people got tired of just finding wild tobacco lying around. So they did what humans do with literally everything useful. They started growing it on purpose. Bred it, tweaked it, made it stronger. Kind of like accidentally upgrading a video game character, except the character is a leaf and the upgrade is now messes with your brain even more. And once people were growing this thing on purpose, the ways they used it multiplied fast. Some groups smoked it in pipes. Some rolled it into crude cigars. Some ground it into a powder and snorted it as snuff. Some cultures in the Amazon even took it as a strong drink, or, and this part tends to get a reaction, administered it as an enema during certain ceremonies. Yes, really. 12,000 years of human experimentation will apparently try every possible entry point. But mostly, it didn't stay casual. Among many Native American nations, sharing a pipe wasn't a sneak behind the building kind of moment. It was serious. The calumet, sometimes called the peace pipe, could seal a treaty, end a war, or open a ceremony, all in one shared breath. You didn't smoke to unwind. You smoked to make a promise. Imagine treating your lunch break like a legally binding contract. That's the vibe. Now here's the part that kind of ruins the whole thing. Humans didn't invent the chemical that makes tobacco addictive. The plant did. And it definitely wasn't built for us. Nicotine is basically bug spray. The plant makes it to poison insects that try to eat its leaves. For almost every bug on Earth, nicotine is a death sentence. Strong enough that farmers used raw nicotine as an actual pesticide for centuries before modern chemical sprays existed. Humans just happen to be built differently enough that the same poison in a tiny dose doesn't kill us. Instead, it hits the part of the brain that handles feeling good. And go figure, some people like that a little too much. So every calm, relaxed puff anyone has ever taken is technically a side effect of bug poison. You're not smoking a stress reliever, you're smoking a pesticide that happens to feel nice to humans specifically, which is a genuinely wild coincidence to build an entire global industry on. The part of this story most people do know starts later, in 1492, and honestly, starts worse than it should. When Columbus's ships reached Cuba, he sent two men inland to check out the island. One of them was a sailor named Rodrigo de Jerez. What they found were local people rolling dried leaves into a tube, lighting one end, and breathing in the smoke. Something no European had ever seen before in their entire lives. De Jerez picked up the habit himself and brought it home to Spain. He lights up in front of his neighbors, and instead of anyone saying, "Oh, nice, where'd you get that?" they see smoke pouring out of his mouth and nose and go, "That man is possessed by the devil." The Spanish Inquisition actually threw him in prison for smoking, which might be the worst first impression a hobby has ever made in human history. A few decades later, a French guy named Jean Nicot starts hyping tobacco up as basically medicine. It didn't cure anything, but his name stuck around anyway. Literally, nicotine is named after him. Somewhere out there, Jean Nicot has absolutely no idea he accidentally got his name permanently attached to warning labels on cigarette packs for the rest of recorded history. Rough legacy. And once tobacco got loose in the world, it moved fast. Within about 100 years, it had spread to the Ottoman Empire, into China, across Japan, and along West African trade routes. One of the quickest global adoptions of any product in that entire era. Centuries before anything like shipping or advertising existed to help it along. People everywhere, with wildly different cultures and no contact with each other, all landed on the same conclusion. This thing was worth having. From there, tobacco stopped being a curiosity and turned into money fast. In the early 1600s, a colonist named John Rolfe started growing a smoother strain of tobacco in the struggling colony of Jamestown. Within a few years, that one crop basically saved the colony financially. It also helped kick off a brutal plantation economy in the Americas built on forced labor, a heavy, uncomfortable cost behind a plant that started out as a hunter-gatherer's curiosity around a desert fire. By the time all of that history finished playing out, a wild plant nobody had ever farmed had become one of the most profitable, most traded, and most fought over crops on the planet. All because someone, 12,000 years earlier, looked at a bitter weed and thought, "Let's see what happens if we set this on fire." And the story gets one more genuinely funny detour before it ends. By the early 1900s, cigarettes were mass-produced, cheap, and everywhere. And companies wanted doctors to help sell them. So actual advertisements ran claiming physicians recommended one cigarette brand over another for a smoother, more soothing smoke. Doctors' coats and stethoscopes included, right there in the print ad. A product built on plant-based bug poison was for a while marketed as basically healthcare. Eventually, the science caught up. The warning labels arrived, filters got added, taxes went up, and public opinion flipped hard in the other direction. And now there's vaping, which is really just the same 12,000-year-old trick wearing a sleeker outfit and charging over USB. So here's the actual chain. A hunter-gatherer's campfire in the desert, 12,300 years ago. A sacred pipe sealing a peace deal. A sailor thrown in prison for smoking. A Frenchman who accidentally became a warning label. A crop that spread across 4 continents in a single century. A colony saved and a system built on forced labor riding on the back of one crop. And then you, outside your office, lighting a cigarette on your lunch break. Congratulations! You're the newest link in a 12,000-year-old chain. And the whole thing runs on bug spray that happens to feel nice to humans. Doesn't feel quite as modern anymore, does it?